Welcome to the American Valor World War II channel. Subscribe to our channel because every day we publish stories about the valor of American soldiers based on real events. Support us. Like our videos if you like what we do for you. September 19th, 1944, 7:30. The first raindrops fall through the dense canopy of fir trees, creating a ghostly patter across the helmets of American soldiers poised at the edge of the Hürtgen Forest. The 70 square miles of ancient woodland spanning the German-Belgian border stands like a dark sentinel guarding the approach to the Roar River dams. Lieutenant General Courtney Hodges, commander of the 1st U.S. Army, studies his maps in the command post, unaware that his decision to enter these woods will lead to one of the most devastating battles in American military history. "This forest gives me the creeps," whispers Private First Class Thomas Withers to his squad mate as they stare into the dark mass of trees. "Looks like something out of a grim fairy tale." "Cut the chatter," Sergeant William Harris snaps, but his eyes betray the same unease. The forest before them seems to breathe with malevolent anticipation, its dark mass swallowing the morning light. What appears on maps as a simple tract of woodland will become known to the men who fight there as the Death Factory, a place where the trees themselves become weapons, where the earth conceals lethal traps, and where the constant rain turns foxholes into frigid graves. Intelligence says light German resistance, Lieutenant Jack Garrison informs his platoon leaders, tapping the map with his pencil. "We'll advance through these fire breaks here and here, linking up with the 47th Infantry at this junction." The officers nod, but their expressions reveal skepticism. The German border is mere kilometers away. No one expects the Wehrmacht to yield their homeland without a desperate fight. This is the story of the 28th Infantry Division, the Bloody Bucket, and their nightmarish ordeal in the killing grounds of Hürtgen. Every horror described here happened, every death recorded, every cry of agony echoed through real trees that still stand today, bearing within their growth rings the embedded metal fragments of a battle that devoured men's bodies and souls. The 9th Infantry Division enters the forest first. For weeks, they struggle to advance through the dense trees and German defenses. Machine gun fire slices through the underbrush. Artillery shells detonate in the treetops, creating lethal showers of wood splinters and shrapnel. The dreaded tree bursts that will become the signature horror of the Hürtgen campaign. "What the hell?" screams Private James Morrison as wooden splinters the size of daggers rain down from the canopy, impaling his comrade through the shoulder. "They're coming from above!" The wounded man writhes on the ground, blood spreading across his uniform as medics rush forward. "It's the trees," explains Sergeant Frank Colby, his voice flat with resignation. "Shells hit the branches and explode above us. The wood becomes shrapnel." He pulls a 6-inch splinter from his own helmet, a splinter that would have penetrated his skull had it struck a few inches lower. By October 16, the 9th Division has gained just 3,000 yards at the staggering cost of 4,500 casualties. The forest has consumed an entire American division, and the battle has only begun. October 16, 1944, 1645. Major General Norman Dutch Coda, commander of the 28th Infantry Division, stands at the edge of the forest as his men prepare to relieve the battered 9th Division. A D-Day veteran known for his personal courage, Coda has led his Pennsylvania National Guard Division through the hedgerows of Normandy and the triumphal march through Paris. But nothing has prepared him for what waits in these woods. "I don't like the look of this place," he tells his staff. "We'll be fighting the terrain as much as the Germans." Colonel Guston Nelson, commanding the 112th Infantry Regiment, studies the map spread across the hood of a jeep. "Sir, this ravine, the Kahl Gorge, it's the only approach to Schmidt. Can we get armor through there?" Coda frowns, tracing the contour lines with his finger. "Engineering says it's possible, but difficult. We'll need to improve the trail." "And if we can't?" Nelson presses. Coda's expression darkens. "Then the infantry will have to do it alone." How prophetic his words will prove to be. The 28th Division's 3 infantry regiments, the 109th, 110th, and 112th, move into position. Most of the men are replacements, hastily trained and untested in battle. Some are former anti-aircraft crews and even Air Force personnel converted to infantry after the desperate need for riflemen following the Normandy campaign. Private Henry Diaz, a 19-year-old replacement who joined the division just 3 weeks earlier, clutches his M1 rifle with trembling hands. "What's it like?" he asks Corporal Matthew Jenkins, one of the few veterans left in his squad. Jenkins stares into the forest for a long moment before answering. "It's not like anything they trained you for, kid. Just stay close to me and do exactly what I say." "Have you seen a lot of combat?" Jenkins's laugh is hollow. "I'm the last man alive from my original squad. Everyone else is dead or wounded." He doesn't mention that his entire company has been replaced 3 times over since D-Day. Colonel Daniel Strickler, commanding the 109th Infantry Regiment, receives his orders. Attack north from Germeter toward the village of Hürtgen, drawing German forces away from the main American thrust further north. On paper, it looks straightforward. The reality will be a descent into hell. October 26, 1944, 1830. Rain falls incessantly, transforming the forest floor into a quagmire. In their foxholes, the men of the 28th Division sit in water up to their ankles. Their uniforms remain perpetually wet. Trench foot, a painful condition where constant moisture causes tissue to die, begins to claim its first victims. In the medical tent, Private James Conroy writhes in agony as a medic examines his blackened, gangrenous feet. "Jesus Christ," the medic mutters. "How long have you been wearing these boots?" 6 days, Conroy gasps. "We weren't allowed to remove them. Had to be ready to move at any time." "It feels like they're on fire," he continues, "like they're being eaten from the inside." The medic's face is grim as he signals for a stretcher bearer. "You're going back to the field hospital. They might be able to save them there." "Am I going to lose my feet?" Conroy asks, his voice cracking. The medic doesn't answer. Amputation may be necessary, and Conroy hasn't even faced enemy fire yet. Across the forest, soldiers prepare for the coming attack. Lieutenant William Brace inspects his platoon, noting their haggard appearance. "Get some rest if you can," he tells them. "We move out at 0800 tomorrow." Private Samuel Westfield raises his hand. "Sir, what about the mines? We've heard the Krauts have mined everything." "Engineers will clear paths ahead of us," Brace answers, not entirely convinced himself. Intelligence reports about German defensive positions have been spotty at best. In his waterlogged foxhole, Sergeant Peter McKnight tries to write a letter home by the dim light of a covered flashlight. "Dearest Mary, if you're reading this, I didn't make it. They're sending us into the forest tomorrow. The men who've been there call it the Green Hell. I don't know what we'll find, but I have a bad feeling. Please tell Timmy his father loves him." He stops writing, folding the paper and tucking it into his breast pocket. Sleep doesn't come easily. Lieutenant Colonel Guston Nelson's 112th Infantry Regiment receives its attack orders. They will strike toward Schmidt, a key German-held town. The only approach is through a steep gorge carved by the Kahl River, a narrow defile where tanks and heavy equipment cannot pass. Intelligence reports suggest light German resistance. The reports are fatally wrong. October 31, 1944, 2300 OC. Captain James Condon, operations officer for the 112th Infantry, briefs his battalion commanders on the attack plan. "First Battalion will secure Wassenack," he explains, pointing to the map. "Second Battalion will then push through, cross the Kahl River, and take Schmidt." Major Albert Flood, commanding the 2nd Battalion, studies the terrain with concern. "What about this ravine? The Kahl Gorge. Can we get armor through?" "Engineers say it's possible," Condon replies. "They'll improve the trail as we advance." "And if they can't?" Flood persists. "Then you'll have to hold Schmidt with what you have," Condon admits. "But intelligence reports minimal German presence there. They're not expecting us to come through that way." Major Flood's expression remains troubled. He's a veteran officer, suspicious of reports promising easy victories. "We'll need artillery support," he insists, "and lots of it." "You'll have it," Condon assures him, though he knows the dense forest canopy will limit its effectiveness. The barrage starts at 0700. November 1, 1944, 23:30. On the eve of their attack, the men of the 28th Division try to sleep amid the constant dripping of rain through the trees. Their foxholes have become small ponds. Sergeant William Parker of the 109th Infantry writes in his journal, "This forest feels wrong. It watches us, waits for us. The trees stand like silent sentinels, marking time until our deaths. Tomorrow we attack, and I cannot shake the feeling that we are being led to slaughter." He will be dead within 36 hours. In his command bunker, General der Panzertruppe Erich Brandenberger, commander of the German 7th Army, receives reports of American troop movements along the forest edge. "They're coming," he tells his staff, "right where we want them." Colonel Hürtgen Koenig, commanding the German 275th Infantry Division, points to the map. "The Americans will try to advance through these fire breaks," he predicts. "We've prepared something special for them." His finger taps a location marked Wilde Sau, wild pig, the code name for an extensive minefield laid across the American approach route. "And if they try for Schmidt?" asks his operations officer. Koenig smiles thinly. "They'll have to cross the Kahl Gorge, one narrow trail, easily targeted by our artillery. If they somehow reach Schmidt, the 116th Panzer Division will be waiting to counterattack. It is a perfect trap, and the Americans are about to walk right into it." November 2nd, 1944, 06:45. The pre-dawn darkness is absolute. A cold, penetrating drizzle continues to fall. Men of the 28th Division check their weapons one last time, their fingers numb with cold. Many haven't slept, their nerves too frayed by anticipation of the coming battle. Lieutenant Robert Summers addresses his platoon and whispers, "Stay tight, watch your sectors, and remember, no smoking, no talking once we cross the line of departure." Private Thomas Elliott, a replacement who joined the company just a week earlier, clutches his rosary beads. "Our Father, who art in heaven," he mouths silently. Next to him, Corporal David Wilson checks his Thompson submachine gun for the third time. "First time in combat?" Wilson asks the young private. Elliott nods, unable to speak. "Just stick close to me," Wilson advises. "And if things go to hell, keep moving forward. Standing still gets you killed." Wilson doesn't mention that he's the sole survivor of his original squad from Normandy. The odds aren't good for either of them. At 0700, the American artillery barrage begins, shells screaming overhead to pound the German positions. But the dense forest canopy causes many shells to detonate in the treetops, creating deadly showers of wood splinters and metal fragments that rain down on attacker and defender alike. "The trees are killing us," shouts Private Thomas Reynolds as a splinter the size of a pencil embeds itself in his shoulder. "Our own shells are killing us." Staff Sergeant James Murdoch watches in horror as a tree burst catches his point squad in the open. "Get down!" he screams, but it's too late. Wooden splinters, some 3 feet long, pierce helmets and body armor with ease. 3 men fall, impaled by their own artillery's effects. Murdoch crawls forward, finding Private Henry Collins still alive, despite a foot-long splinter through his thigh. "Medic! Medic!" Murdoch calls, applying pressure around the wound. Blood pulses between his fingers. "Am I gonna die, Sarge?" Collins gasps, his face gray with shock. "Not today, soldier," Murdoch lies, knowing the femoral artery has been hit. Collins bleeds out before the medic can reach them, becoming one of the first casualties in an attack that has barely begun. At 0800, the men of the 28th Division begin their advance. The 109th Infantry Regiment, led by Colonel Strickler, moves north from Germeter toward the village of Hürtgen. They advance barely 300 yards before disaster strikes. "Mines! Mines!" The warning cry tears through the formation as men begin to disappear in geysers of dirt and blood. The 109th has stumbled into an unmarked German minefield, the first of many they will encounter. This one bears the ominous German codename Wilde Sau, wild pig. Private First Class Raymond Garcia steps forward, then freezes as the distinctive click of a mine's pressure plate sounds beneath his boot. The color drains from his face. "Don't move," whispers Sergeant James Wilkins. "Stay perfectly still." Garcia's voice quavers. "I stepped on something, Sarge. Heard it click." "It's an S-mine," Wilkins says quietly, recognizing the sound. "Bouncing Betty." His mind races. The German S-mine is particularly lethal. When triggered, it leaps 3 feet into the air before exploding, sending thousands of steel balls in a 360-degree pattern at waist height. If Garcia moves, everyone within 20 meters will likely die. "What do I do?" Garcia pleads, frozen in place, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. "Don't move a muscle," Wilkins orders. "I'm getting the engineers." He turns to the rest of the squad. "Everyone back, 20 meters minimum." "Don't leave me," Garcia begs, tears streaming down his face. "I'm coming right back," Wilkins promises. "Just hold still." He crawls backward, then runs in a crouch to find the combat engineers who are supposed to be clearing paths through the minefield. Combat engineers rush forward with mine detectors and probes, but the German S-mines, bouncing Bettys, are particularly insidious. They contain minimal metal, making them almost invisible to detectors. When triggered, they spring 3 feet into the air before exploding at waist height, sending thousands of steel balls in all directions. Technician 5th grade Paul Reynolds, a combat engineer, approaches Garcia cautiously. "I'm going to try to deactivate it," he explains, his voice calmer than he feels. "But I need you to stay absolutely still." "I can't feel my legs anymore," Garcia sobs. "They're going numb." "That's okay," Reynolds says, carefully brushing away dirt around Garcia's boot to expose the mine. "Just don't shift your weight." For 15 agonizing minutes, Reynolds works to disarm the detonator, sweat dripping from his brow despite the cold. Finally, he sits back on his heels. "Okay, I've got it. You can move now." Garcia sways, his legs buckling from being locked in the same position. Reynolds catches him, dragging him clear of the danger area. "Get him out of here," he orders a nearby medic. Garcia is one of the lucky ones. Dozens more won't be. As the engineers work frantically to clear a path, German mortars begin to fall. The Americans are pinned down, caught in the open, unable to advance or retreat. Men desperately dig foxholes with helmets and bare hands as shells crash around them. "We're sitting ducks," yells a soldier before a tree burst silences him forever. Captain Howard Mills, commanding Company B of the 109th, tries to reorganize his scattered unit. "First platoon, push forward along the cleared path," he orders into his radio. "Second platoon, provide covering fire." "Sir, first platoon is down to 17 men," comes the response. "We've lost both the lieutenant and the platoon sergeant." Mills curses under his breath. They've advanced less than 400 yards and already his company is disintegrating. "Who's in command there?" "Staff Sergeant Donovan, sir." "All right, Donovan is now acting platoon leader. Tell him to push forward as ordered." Mills knows they have to get through the minefield, or the entire regiment will be stalled here, vulnerable to German artillery. But the cost is already becoming prohibitive. The 109th makes it just 1 mile in 2 days of fighting, then digs in to endure a relentless barrage of German artillery. Their attack has stalled almost before it began. Meanwhile, the 110th Infantry Regiment attacks to the south, tasked with clearing the woods alongside the Kal River and capturing the village of Simonskal. Their progress is equally dismal. The narrow trails force them into single file, perfect targets for German machine guns that sweep the paths with interlocking fire. "Covering fire!" shouts Lieutenant Edward Blake as his platoon comes under fire from a hidden German machine gun. "Garrett, get that BAR working. Johnson, find that gun nest." Private First Class Samuel Johnson crawls forward through the underbrush, trying to locate the source of the fire. Bullets snap overhead and thud into trees around him. Suddenly, he spots the muzzle flash, a German MG-42 concealed in a small bunker ahead. 30 degrees right, he calls back. About 50 yards, in a bunker. Blake orders his 60mm mortar team to target the position. The first round falls short, the second overshoots. The third hits directly on the bunker, temporarily silencing the gun. Blake orders an assault, and his men rush forward, only to be cut down by a second machine gun they hadn't spotted. "Fall back!" Blake screams as half his assault team collapses under the devastating crossfire. "It's a trap! They've got interlocking fields of fire." By nightfall, Blake's platoon has lost 14 men killed or wounded. They've advanced less than 300 yards. The unit's daily report states simply, "Heavy resistance encountered, unable to advance against prepared enemy positions. Casualties severe." November 3, 1944, 5:30. Dawn breaks with a dismal gray light filtering through the fog-shrouded trees. The men of the 112th Infantry Regiment prepare to resume their attack towards Schmidt. Unlike their comrades in the 109th, they've made significant progress. Yesterday, they captured the village of Wassenack after hard fighting. Now they face their greatest challenge, crossing the steep Cow Gorge to reach Schmidt. Captain Lawrence Madden briefs his company commanders as they crouch in a damaged building on the edge of Wassenack. 2nd Battalion will lead the advance across the Cow, he explains. 1st and 3rd Battalions will secure Wassenack and the approaches to the gorge. Engineers are already working to improve the trail for vehicle traffic. Lieutenant Edwin Johnson, a platoon leader in Company G, studies the crude map. "Sir, this ravine looks nearly impassable. How are we supposed to get tanks through there?" "That's the engineer's problem," Madden replies. "Our job is to get to Schmidt. Intelligence says the Germans aren't expecting us to come that way. If we move fast, we can take them by surprise." Johnson remains skeptical, but keeps his doubts to himself. In the month since he joined the division as a replacement officer, he's learned that questioning orders rarely changes them. Lieutenant Colonel Albert Flood's 2nd Battalion leads the way, working through the night to clear a path down the treacherous gorge to the river. The Cow Gorge is a nightmare, a steep, V-shaped ravine with near vertical sides in places. The only path is a narrow forest trail, barely wide enough for a jeep, let alone a tank. Engineers work frantically with demolition charges and hand tools to widen it, but progress is painfully slow. "This is insanity," mutters Sergeant Frank DeVito as his squad struggles down the slippery path. "One German with a machine gun could stop a whole battalion here." "Keep moving," Lieutenant Samuel Harris orders. "We need to establish a bridgehead on the other side before the Germans realize what we're doing." By dawn on November 3, the Americans have crossed the Col and begun their ascent towards Schmidt on the other side. The going is painfully slow, with men slipping on the muddy path and equipment having to be manhandled up the steep slope. But the Germans, incredibly, have left this approach largely unguarded. Their attention is focused on the more obvious routes through the forest. At 09:30, the lead elements of the 112th Infantry emerge from the forest to see Schmidt spread before them on a ridge. The German defenders, surprised by the Americans' rapid advance through terrain they considered impassable, withdraw in confusion. Lieutenant Edwin Johnson can't believe their luck as his platoon enters the outskirts of Schmidt. "Where are the Germans?" he asks his radio operator. "Intelligence said there was at least a company defending this place." "Maybe they pulled out, sir," the operator suggests hopefully. Johnson shakes his head. His instincts, honed by weeks of combat, tell him something is wrong. "Set up defensive positions," he orders his platoon. "I don't like this. It's too easy." By nightfall, Schmidt is in American hands. Colonel Nelson radios the news to General Cota. "Objective secured. Minimal resistance." It's the high water mark of the 28th Division's Hürtgen Forest campaign. It won't last. November 4, 1944, 06:15. Dawn breaks with an eerie silence over Schmidt. The men of the 112th Infantry, exhausted from their arduous journey through the Cow Gorge, have established defensive positions around the town. They have no tanks. The trail through the gorge proved impassable for armor, and limited artillery support due to the difficult terrain. Lieutenant Edwin Johnson sits in the cellar of a damaged house that serves as his platoon command post. He's been awake for 36 hours straight, and fatigue clouds his thinking. "Something's wrong," he tells his platoon sergeant, Thomas Kelly. "Where's our armor? Where's our artillery support? We're sitting ducks up here." Kelly nods grimly. Engineers are still working on the call trails, sir, but it's slow going. Battalion says the first tanks might get through by noon. If the Germans counterattack before then we're on our own, Kelly finishes. As the morning mist begins to lift, sentries on the eastern edge of town spot movement. At first, just shadows in the tree line. Then the unmistakable outline of German tanks, Panther and Jagdpanther tank destroyers of the 116th Panzer Division, moving into position. Armor! Enemy armor approaching from the east! The cry spreads through the American positions like wildfire. Johnson grabs his rifle and rushes to the eastern perimeter, Kelly close behind. Through his binoculars, he counts 8 German tanks emerging from the mist, infantry moving in their shadows. Bazooka teams, up front, he shouts. Everyone else, prepare for artillery. But the 2.36-inch bazookas carried by American infantry are woefully inadequate against the heavy frontal armor of German Panther tanks. They might as well be throwing rocks. At 0630, German artillery opens up with a vengeance. Shells rain down on Schmidt in a methodical pattern, walking from one end of the town to the other and back again. The Americans, with few buildings intact for shelter, huddle in shallow foxholes as the bombardment continues for nearly 30 minutes. Private Henry Wilson, a replacement who joined the company just 3 weeks earlier, presses himself into his foxhole as shells explode around him. The concussion lifts him bodily from the ground, slamming him back down. His ears ring so badly, he can't hear his own screams. Next to him, Private Samuel Jackson disappears in a direct hit, leaving nothing but a smoking crater. "They're targeting our positions," Sergeant Kelly yells, barely audible over the bombardment. "They know exactly where we are." Lieutenant Johnson realizes the terrible truth. The Germans allowed them to take Schmidt uncontested, carefully noting their positions, and now they're systematically destroying them with precision artillery fire. Then the German infantry attacks, supported by tanks. The Americans fight desperately, but without anti-tank weapons, they can do little against the German armor. One by one, American positions are overrun. Captain Lawrence Madden tries to coordinate a defense, but his radio communications with battalion headquarters across the Col have been severed by German artillery. "Where the hell is our armor?" he demands of no one in particular. "Where's our artillery support?" "Sir, we need to pull back," his executive officer urges. "We can't stop those tanks with what we have." Madden knows he's right, but the order to withdraw has to come from battalion. Without communications, he's on his own. "Hold as long as you can," he tells his company commanders. "If it gets hopeless, fall back to Kammerscheid." Lieutenant Johnson's platoon is among the first to be overrun. A Panther tank rumbles directly toward his position, its 75mm gun firing point-blank into buildings occupied by American troops. Johnson and 3 of his men attempt to flank it with a bazooka, but the tank commander spots them. The machine gun, mounted on the tank turret, traverses toward them, and Johnson's world dissolves into fire and pain. He dies without knowing that his battalion is already in full retreat. Fall back to Kammerscheid." The retreat quickly becomes chaotic. Men abandon weapons and equipment as they flee toward the relative safety of Kammerscheid, a smaller village between Schmidt and the Col River. Private First Class Michael Collins, separated from his squad during the bombardment, finds himself alone in a damaged building as German infantry advances down the street outside. He hides in a closet as German soldiers enter the house, searching for Americans. They speak in low voices, just feet away from his hiding place. "Die Amerikaner sind weg." The Americans are gone. "Nicht alle. Suchen Sie weiter." Not all. Keep searching. Collins holds his breath, pressing himself against the back of the closet. After an eternity, the Germans move on. When night falls, he slips out and makes his way toward American lines, one of the few to escape the Schmidt disaster. Some become lost in the forest, wandering for days before being captured or killed. Others make it to the Col Trail, only to find it clogged with wounded men being evacuated and supplies trying to move forward. By mid-morning, Schmidt is back in German hands, and the surviving Americans are fighting a desperate holding action in Kammerscheid. A captured German officer later remarked, "We were amazed that American forces would attempt to attack through such terrain with so little support. It was like watching men walk willingly into a trap." November 5, 1944. 700. The morning after the Schmidt disaster, Major General Coda meets with his staff in a farmhouse near Rot, several kilometers behind the front lines. The news is grim. The 112th Infantry has been driven from Schmidt with heavy casualties. They're clinging to Kammerscheid, but German armor threatens to push them back across the Kahl River entirely. "We need tanks in Kammerscheid now," Coda insists, pounding the map with his fist. Without armor support, the 112th won't last another day. Colonel Guston Nelson, commander of the 112th, looks exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "The Kahl Trail is a nightmare, sir. Engineers have been working on it non-stop, but it's barely passable for jeeps, let alone tanks." "I don't want excuses, I want solutions," Coda snaps. "Those men need armor support, and they need it now." Lieutenant Colonel Richard Ripple, commanding the 707th Tank Battalion, speaks up. "Sir, I'll lead a column myself. We'll get tanks across that gorge if it's humanly possible." Coda nods grimly. "Do it, and God help you." 12 o'clock. General Coda, desperate to salvage the situation, orders tanks to reinforce Kammerscheid. The only route is the treacherous Kahl Trail, little more than a muddy track winding down one side of the gorge and up the other. Lieutenant Colonel Richard Ripple, commanding the 707th Tank Battalion, personally leads the column of Sherman tanks down the trail. It's a harrowing journey. The path is barely wide enough for the tanks' treads. On one side rises a steep, muddy embankment. On the other, a sheer drop to the Kahl River below. The lead tank, commanded by Lieutenant Walter Bills, inches forward cautiously. "This is insane," mutters Bill's gunner, Corporal James Martinez. "One slip and we're at the bottom of that ravine." "Just pray the Germans don't have this trail zeroed in for artillery," Bills replies, his eyes fixed on the narrow path ahead. "We'd be sitting ducks." The lead tank slips off the trail and becomes wedged between trees. Engineers work frantically with winches and cables to free it as German artillery begins targeting the stalled column. Shells crash through the treetops, showering the men with lethal wooden splinters. Lieutenant Bills is outside his tank, directing the recovery effort, when a tree burst explodes overhead. A wooden splinter the size of a baseball bat impales him through the chest, killing him instantly. His driver, Sergeant Paul Davidson, takes command, working with the engineers to free the tank. "We're being slaughtered out here," Davidson shouts as more artillery rounds impact around them. "We need to keep moving." After hours of effort, a few tanks make it through to Kammerscheid, providing crucial support to the embattled infantry. But the Kahl Trail has proven itself a death trap, a bottleneck that will continue to strangle the American supply lines. In his command post, General Coda receives increasingly desperate reports. The 109th is still pinned down by mines and artillery. The 110th is being systematically destroyed in the woods south of Germeter. And now the 112th is fighting for survival in Kammerscheid, cut off from effective support. "Sir, we need to withdraw," advises his operations officer. But orders from Corps are inflexible. "Hold positions. Continue attack." November 6, 1944, 08 o'clock. The 109th Infantry Regiment continues its struggle against the Wilde Sau minefield. Combat engineers work tirelessly to clear paths through the deadly obstacle. Private Henry Willard describes the harrowing process. "We crawl forward on our bellies, probing every inch of ground with bayonets. When we find a mine, we carefully expose it, then disarm the detonator. One wrong move means death. We've lost 3 men already just clearing a path 50 yards long." The physical toll is immense. Men work in the cold mud for hours, their fingers numb, always knowing that one moment of inattention could be their last. Private Willard continues, "The worst are the S-mines, bouncing Bettys. They're designed to jump up to waist height before exploding, sending thousands of steel balls in all directions. If one man triggers it, Everyone within 20 yards is likely to die. We lost an entire squad yesterday when their point man stepped on one. By the end of the day, the engineers have cleared several paths through the minefield, but at a terrible cost. The 109th advances just 500 yards, still far short of their objective. Meanwhile, the situation in Kammerscheid deteriorates. The few American tanks that made it across the Kahl Gorge are being systematically destroyed by superior German armor. Captain Bruce Hostrup watches in horror as a German Jagdpanther scores a direct hit on a Sherman tank. The shell penetrated the front armor like it was paper. The tank erupted in flames, its ammunition cooking off inside. We could hear the crew screaming. His voice trails off. No one escaped the burning tank. Lieutenant Edward Collins, commanding a rifle platoon in Kammerscheid, struggles to maintain his men's fighting position as German tanks approach their sector. "Hold your fire until they're in range of the bazookas," he orders, though he knows the 2.36-inch rockets have little chance against Panther tanks' frontal armor. Aim for the tracks or the rear armor. His men are exhausted, many having gone without sleep for over 48 hours. Private Henry Jackson's hands shake uncontrollably as he loads his rifle. "We can't stop those tanks, sir," he whispers. "Not with what we've got." "We hold this position," Collins replies firmly. "That's an order." The German tanks advance methodically, infantry moving in their shadows. Collins waits until they're within 100 yards, then gives the order. "Bazooka teams, fire! Everyone else, target the infantry." The anti-tank rockets streak toward the lead Panther, most missing or deflecting harmlessly off its sloped frontal armor. But one lucky shot hits the tank's track, immobilizing it. The tank's turret swivels, its 75mm gun seeking the source of the attack. "Scatter!" Collins screams as the gun fires. The high explosive shell demolishes the building they're using for cover, killing 2 men instantly and wounding several others. Collins is thrown against a wall, shrapnel tearing through his leg. "Fall back," he orders, dragging himself to his feet. "Fall back to the church." By nightfall, the Americans in Kammerscheid have been pushed into an ever-shrinking perimeter. Without tank support, it's only a matter of time before they're overrun completely. November 7, 1944, 0430. Before dawn, Captain Lawrence Madden gathers his remaining officers in a cellar that serves as their command post in Kammerscheid. The news is grim. German armor has surrounded their position on 3 sides. The route back to the Kahl River remains open, but barely. "Battalion orders are to hold our position," Madden tells them, his voice hoarse from shouting over artillery fire. "Reinforcements are supposed to be coming across the Kahl." Lieutenant James Wilson, his arm in a bloody sling, laughs bitterly. "We've heard that for 3 days now. Where are they?" "The trail is a nightmare," explains Lieutenant Robert Hayes, who arrived just hours earlier with a handful of replacements. "It took us 6 hours to get across. Tanks and heavy equipment don't stand a chance. So we're on our own," Wilson concludes. Madden nods grimly. "For now. But we hold. Those are our orders." Outside, German artillery begins its morning barrage, shell after shell impacting systematically across the American positions. The cellar shakes with each explosion, dust filtering down from the ceiling. 0700. The situation in Wassenack deteriorates rapidly. German artillery has pounded the village for days, reducing it to rubble. American positions on the exposed ridge receive fire from 3 sides. Snipers target anyone who moves. The psychological pressure becomes unbearable. At 0700, something extraordinary happens. Elements of the 112th Infantry's 2nd Battalion, combat veterans who have fought from Normandy to the German border, simply break. It begins with 1 man, then another, then dozens, dropping their weapons and running to the rear. "They just walked away," reported a shocked artillery observer, empty-eyed, not responding to commands or threats. Lieutenant Colonel Husted, the battalion commander, tries desperately to rally his men. "Where are you going?" he demands, grabbing a retreating soldier by his jacket. "Get back to your position." The soldier stares through him, unseeing. "No more," he whispers. "Can't take any more." He pulls free and continues walking toward the rear, joined by a stream of others in similar states of psychological collapse. Combat fatigue, what later wars will call PTSD, has claimed an entire battalion. The phenomenon is so severe that medics begin diagnosing Hürtgen Syndrome, a particular form of battle exhaustion characterized by uncontrollable trembling, thousand-yard stares, and complete unresponsiveness to external stimuli. Captain Michael Steiner, a division psychiatrist, attempts to treat some of the most severe cases at an aid station behind the lines. "I've never seen anything like it," he tells a colleague. "These men aren't malingering. Their minds have simply shut down to escape the horror. Some can't speak, others shake uncontrollably. Many have regressed to childlike states." One soldier, a staff sergeant and decorated veteran of the Normandy campaign, sits rocking back and forth, tears streaming down his face. "The trees," he repeats endlessly. "The trees are screaming. Can't you hear them? They're screaming." With no infantry to protect them, American artillery observers and anti-tank units in Wassenack are exposed to German counterattacks. General Koda, in a desperate move, orders engineers into the line as infantry. The 146th Combat Engineers, still wearing their raincoats and hip boots, grab rifles and move to the front lines. For the next 24 hours, they fight house to house in Wassenack, holding the line where combat infantry could not. One engineer later wrote, "We weren't trained for this. We were bridge builders and road clearers. But there we were, fighting like infantry in the ruins of that damned village, with men dying all around us. I'll never forget the sound of the German burp guns or the screams of the wounded who couldn't be evacuated." Sergeant Paul Davidson, commanding a squad of combat engineers turned infantrymen, positions his men in the ruins of what was once a church. "Spread out," he orders. "One man per window. Make every shot count." Private Thomas Reynolds, a demolition specialist who has never fired his rifle in combat, asks nervously, "What if they bring up tanks?" Davidson's laugh is hollow. "Then we die. We don't have anti-tank weapons." At midday, German infantry probes their position. The engineers, despite their lack of infantry training, fight with desperate courage. They drive back the first German assault, but not without cost. 3 engineers die, and several others are wounded. "We can't hold if they attack in force," Davidson tells his platoon leader, Lieutenant Jack Harrison. "We hold until relieved," Harrison replies grimly. "Those are our orders." As night falls, the engineers prepare for another German assault. They know their chances of survival are slim. November 8, 1944, 10:15. In the Wilde Sau minefield, the 109th Infantry continues its painfully slow advance. Each yard gained costs American blood. Lieutenant James Conover leads a platoon tasked with clearing a section of the field. "Stay in the cleared paths," he warns his men. "Step exactly where the man in front of you steps." The warning is unnecessary. After a week in the Hürtgen, every surviving soldier knows the deadly price of carelessness. They move in single file, placing their feet precisely in the footprints of the man ahead. Despite his caution, disaster strikes. Private Franklin Miller strays just 6 inches off the cleared path. The distinctive click of a mine's trigger mechanism freezes everyone in place. "Don't move!" shouts Conover. But it's too late. The S-mine detonates, springing upward before exploding at waist height. Miller disappears in a cloud of smoke and dirt. When the dust settles, 5 men lie dead or wounded from a single mine. Private Henry Wilson, his face peppered with fragments from the explosion, crawls toward a wounded comrade. "Medic!" he screams. "We need a medic up here." Combat medic Thomas Gray rushes forward, dodging from tree to tree as German machine gun fire sweeps the area. The Germans, well aware of the minefield's location, direct precise mortar fire onto the Americans trying to navigate the deadly obstacle. "They know exactly where we are," mutters Sergeant Paul Davidson as shells impact around his squad. "They're just waiting for us to hit more mines, then they'll finish us with artillery." Gray reaches the wounded men and begins administering first aid. He works with quick, practiced movements, applying tourniquets and morphine. "This one needs immediate evacuation," he tells Davidson, indicating a soldier with a mangled leg. "He'll bleed out otherwise." How the hell are we supposed to evacuate anyone through this? Davidson demands, gesturing at the minefield around them. Gray has no answer. They both know that evacuation through the minefield is nearly impossible. Many of the wounded will die before they can reach an aid station. November 9, 1944, 14:30. The weather worsens. Temperature drops to near freezing as cold rain turns to sleet. In their waterlogged foxholes, men of the 28th Division suffer from exposure. Trench-foot cases multiply. Medical evacuation becomes nearly impossible as the few available roads turn into muddy quagmires. At the division clearing station, doctors work frantically to treat the endless stream of casualties. We're seeing as many men with trench foot and pneumonia as with combat wounds, reports Captain Howard Wiseman, a battalion surgeon. This forest is killing them as surely as German bullets. Private Thomas Jenkins is carried into the aid station on a stretcher, his feet black with gangrene. A week in water-filled foxholes without being able to remove his boots has resulted in advanced trench foot. The doctor examines him grimly. "How bad is it, Doc?" Jenkins asks, his voice weak from fever. The doctor's expression says everything. "We'll do what we can," he replies, but they both know amputation is likely the only option. In another tent, men suffering from combat exhaustion sit staring into space or rocking back and forth. Many exhibit uncontrollable trembling. Others have regressed to childlike states, unable to speak or respond to their surroundings. The division's psychiatrists are overwhelmed by the number of cases. "I've never seen combat fatigue like this," admits Captain Frank Stevens, the division psychiatrist. "The combination of constant artillery, the mines, the tree bursts, and the weather, it's breaking men who survived Normandy and the Siegfried Line." In the Wilde Sau minefield, engineers continue their deadly work. They've discovered a new horror. Some mines are booby-trapped. When they attempt to disarm one mine, it triggers another hidden beneath it. 3 more engineers die in a single explosion. The 109th's advance grinds to a virtual halt. "We're crawling through this forest an inch at a time," Colonel Daniel Strickler tells General Coda during a field telephone call. "Every yard costs us men we can't replace." "Keep pushing," Coda orders. "We need to draw German forces away from Schmidt." But the Schmidt offensive has already failed. The remnants of the 112th Infantry are fighting for survival in Kammerscheid, cut off from the rest of the division by the Kahl Gorge. Without armor support, their position is untenable. November 10, 1944, 06 o'clock. Dawn reveals a ghostly landscape. Fog clings to the trees, reducing visibility to mere yards. The temperature hovers just above freezing. In their foxholes, American soldiers shiver uncontrollably, their uniforms soaked through from days of constant rain. Many have not removed their boots in over a week, fearing that they won't be able to put them back on over their swollen feet. Sergeant William Harris of the 109th Infantry wakes to find his foxhole partner, Private Thomas Reynolds, unresponsive. Reynolds' skin is cold, his lips blue. Hypothermia has claimed him during the night. Another casualty not from German bullets, but from the forest itself. "I need a medic," Harris calls, but his voice is lost in the morning artillery barrage. He tries to drag Reynolds from the foxhole, but his own limbs are numb with cold. By the time help arrives, it's too late. Reynolds becomes another statistic in the mounting toll of the Hürtgen Forest. General Coda receives the morning casualty reports with growing despair. In just 8 days of fighting, the 28th Division has lost over 4,000 men killed, wounded, or missing. The 109th Infantry Regiment is still trapped in the Wilde Sau minefield, having advanced less than a mile since the beginning of the operation. The 110th has been virtually destroyed in the woods south of Germeter. The 112th is barely holding on in Kammerscheid, cut off from the rest of the division by the Kahl Gorge. "We need reinforcements," Coda tells his staff, "and we need them now." But 5th Corps has no reserves to send. The 28th Division must continue with what it has left. In Kammerscheid, Captain Lawrence Madden gathers his remaining officers. His company is down to less than 50 effective fighters, less than a third of its original strength. "Orders are to hold this position," he tells them. Relief is supposedly on the way. With all due respect, sir, that's bullshit, Lieutenant James Wilson responds. No one's coming. The Cowell Trail is a death trap. We need to withdraw while we still can. Madden knows Wilson is right, but orders are orders. We hold, he repeats. That's final. Outside, German armor begins its daily probing attacks, tanks advancing cautiously with infantry and support. The few remaining American bazooka teams prepare for another day of futile resistance against superior German armor. November 11, 1944, 11 o'clock, Armistice Day. 26 years earlier, the guns fell silent across Europe, ending the war to end all wars. Today, in the Hürtgen Forest, there is no armistice, no respite from the killing. In the Wilde Sau minefield, the men of the 109th Infantry continue their nightmarish advance. They've developed a new technique. Volunteers in heavy winter clothing roll across suspected mine locations, hoping their body weight distributed over a larger area won't trigger the pressure plates. It sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. Corporal David Harrison, one such volunteer, rolls across a suspected mine area. On his third roll, a mine detonates, tearing through his layers of clothing. Medics rush forward, but it's too late. Harrison becomes the 167th man lost by the 109th to the Wilde Sau minefield alone. This is suicide, mutters Private James Franklin as he watches Harrison's body being carried to the rear. We're never going to get through this minefield. Orders are to keep pushing, Sergeant William Parker reminds him. So we keep pushing. For what? We haven't gained a mile in 9 days. The whole operation's a disaster. Parker has no answer. The futility of their situation is apparent to every man in the line. In Kammerscheid, the situation reaches a crisis point. German armor surrounds the American perimeter on 3 sides, systematically destroying the buildings being used as defensive positions. Without anti-tank weapons effective against Panther tanks, the Americans can only watch as their perimeter shrinks. We need to pull out now, Captain Bruce Hostrup tells Madden. If they close the gap to the call, we're finished. Madden finally makes the decision that higher command won't. Prepare for withdrawal, he orders. We'll pull back to the Call River line tonight, under cover of darkness. The retreat is a nightmare. Wounded men have to be carried down the steep slopes of the Call Gorge on improvised stretchers. Many slip from their bearer's grasp, tumbling into the ravine below. German artillery, zeroed in on the trail, continues throughout the night, adding to the casualties. By dawn on November 12th, the survivors of the 112th Infantry have retreated to the western bank of the Call. The Schmidt-Kammerscheid offensive, launched with such hope 10 days earlier, has ended in a costly failure. November 12, 1944, 10:30. An extraordinary incident occurs near the German-held Forester's house south of Hürtgen. An American soldier becomes trapped in the Wilde Sau minefield. His agonized cries for help echo through the trees for hours. Someone's out there, reports Private Henry Wilson, on outpost duty near the edge of the minefield. Sounds American. Lieutenant Friedrich Lengfeld, a 23-year-old commander of the German 2nd Company, 275th Infantry Division, listens to the wounded man's cries. They've been ongoing for over 2 hours, growing weaker with each passing minute. Can we reach him? Lengfeld asks his senior NCO, Sergeant Karl Weber. Weber shakes his head. He's in the middle of the Wilde Sau, Herr Leutnant. It would be suicide to try. The American's voice rises again in a piteous wail. Help me! Please, somebody help me! Lengfeld makes a decision. Tell the machine gun crews not to fire if American medics approach to help the soldier, he orders. Hours pass, but no rescue comes. The Americans' cries grow weaker, more desperate. Finally, Lengfeld makes a fateful decision. I can't listen to this anymore, he tells Weber. Get a medic team. We're going to get him ourselves. Herr Leutnant, with respect, it's too dangerous, Weber protests. The minefield. I know the safe paths through the anti-tank mines, Lengfeld interrupts. We can reach him. Reluctantly, Weber assembles a small team of German medics. Lengfeld dons a Red Cross vest and leads them toward the wounded American. Carefully navigating through the anti-tank mines on the nearby road, he approaches the edge of the minefield. At 10:30, as he steps off the road toward the wounded American, Lengfeld triggers an anti-personnel mine. The explosion tears through his body, leaving 2 quarter-sized holes in his back. German medics rush to his aid, carrying him back to their lines. "Get him to the aid station at Freudsheim," Weber orders. But it's too late. Lengfeld dies that evening, having sacrificed his life in an attempt to save an enemy soldier. The identity of the American soldier remains unknown. It is uncertain whether he survived. In this moment of humanity amidst the horror of the Hürtgen, both German and American blood stains the same cold ground. 50 years later, American veterans will erect a monument to Lengfeld's sacrifice, the only memorial to a German soldier placed by his former enemies in a German military cemetery. The inscription reads, "Here in the Hürtgen Forest, on November 12, 1944, Lieutenant Friedrich Lengfeld, a German officer, gave his life while trying to save the life of an American soldier lying severely wounded in the Wilde Sau minefield and appealing for medical aid." November 13, 1944, 15:45. After nearly 2 weeks of continuous combat, the 28th Division is a shadow of its former self. Regiment-sized units are now commanded by captains. Companies are led by sergeants. Many platoons have ceased to exist entirely. Captain James Hendricks, originally a company commander in the 112th Infantry, now finds himself commanding what remains of an entire battalion. Less than 200 men, the equivalent of 2 understrength companies. "What's our status?" he asks his operations sergeant. "Ammunition is critical, sir," the sergeant reports. "We're down to less than 50 rounds per man for rifles. Machine gun ammunition is almost gone. No mortar rounds at all. And personnel? We've got 178 effectives, sir. Maybe half of those are combat infantry. The rest are cooks, clerks, and headquarters personnel we've pressed into service." Hendricks nods grimly. They both know what those numbers mean. His battalion is combat ineffective. It can neither attack nor defend effectively, and yet orders from division remain unchanged. Hold position. Prepare to resume the attack. The division's casualties continue to mount. 109th Infantry, 232 killed, 762 wounded, 190 missing. 110th Infantry, 167 killed, 356 wounded, 196 missing. 112th Infantry, 167 killed, 672 wounded, 164 missing. Over 2,000 men lost in less than 2 weeks of fighting, with hundreds more evacuated for combat exhaustion and trench foot. Entire companies have simply disappeared in the dark forest. The Wilde Sau minefield remains a deadly obstacle. Despite 2 weeks of combat engineering efforts, large sections remain impassable. The 109th Infantry's attack has effectively been stopped cold by this single defensive barrier. In his headquarters, General Coda receives orders from V Corps. "Hold current positions. Prepare for relief by 8th Infantry Division elements." The news spreads through the battered ranks of the 28th Division. Relief is coming. For many, it comes too late. November 14, 1944. 0400. Elements of the 8th Infantry Division and the 2nd Ranger Battalion arrive to relieve the battered 28th Division. As the fresh troops move up to the front, they pass long columns of walking wounded coming the other way. Hollow-eyed men with 1,000-yard stares who offer only one piece of advice. For God's sake, watch the trees. Sergeant William Murray of the 2nd Rangers described the scene. "We'd heard the 28th had been chewed up, but nothing prepared us for what we saw. These weren't just beaten men, they were broken. They looked like they'd seen things no man should see." When we asked about the forest, most couldn't even speak, just shook their heads or stared at the ground. Captain Michael Reynolds, leading a company of the 8th Division's 121st Infantry Regiment, briefs his platoon leaders before moving into the line. "The 28th has been holding these positions for 2 weeks, he explains, pointing to a map. They've been hammered by artillery, minefields, and infantry attacks. We're taking over their sectors and continuing the advance. Sir, what's our objective? Asked Lieutenant James Foster. The same as theirs, the village of Hürtgen, and eventually the Roar River dams beyond. Foster studies the map with concern. Sir, if the 28th couldn't do it in 2 weeks, we have fresh troops and better support, Reynolds interrupts. We'll succeed where they couldn't. His confidence seems forced, even to himself. As the 28th Division withdraws, the full extent of their ordeal becomes apparent. Men stumble to the rear in a daze, many so exhausted they can barely walk. Medical personnel work frantically to treat the most serious cases of exposure and trench foot. My God, what happened to these men? Asks a shocked doctor at the field hospital, seeing the condition of the evacuees. Hürtgen happened, replies a medic who has seen it firsthand. The forest ate them alive. The relief is completed by dawn on November 14. The 28th Division withdraws to recover and rebuild, having suffered over 6,184 combat casualties, plus 738 cases of trench foot and 620 cases of combat exhaustion. Virtually every frontline soldier has become a casualty of some kind. The once proud division has been all but destroyed, but their ordeal in the Hürtgen is not over. Unknown to the shattered men of the 28th, they will soon face another trial. The massive German Ardennes offensive, the Battle of the Bulge, will strike them again in December, when they have barely begun to recover. November 15, 1944, 9 o'clock. As the 28th Division withdraws to rest areas, medical personnel struggle to deal with the flood of casualties. Physical wounds, bullet and shrapnel injuries, mangled limbs from mines, frostbite, and trench foot are treated with increasing efficiency. But the psychological casualties present a new and frightening challenge. Captain Michael Stern, a division psychiatrist, moves among the men suffering from combat exhaustion. Hundreds of soldiers stare blankly at hospital walls, unresponsive to treatment. Others scream in terror at the slightest sound, particularly anything resembling artillery fire. It's like their minds have simply shut down, Stern reports to the division surgeon. They've seen too much, endured too much. The human psyche has limits, and the Hürtgen Forest exceeded those limits. Private Henry Wilson sits on a cot, rocking back and forth, his eyes fixed on nothing. A decorated veteran of the Normandy campaign, he hasn't spoken a word since being evacuated from the Wilde Sau minefield 3 days earlier. Stern kneels beside him, speaking in gentle tones. Wilson, can you hear me? You're safe now. The forest is behind you. Wilson's rocking intensifies. His lips move, but no sound emerges. Tears stream down his face. What's he saying? Asks a nurse. Stern leans closer, trying to make out the words Wilson is mouthing repeatedly. Finally, he sits back with a grim expression. He's saying, the trees are watching. They're always watching. Some men will recover with rest. Others never will, remaining psychological casualties for life. The division's equipment losses are equally staggering. Dozens of vehicles abandoned in the forest, hundreds of weapons lost or destroyed, tens of thousands of rounds of ammunition expended. The 28th Division will need to be almost completely re-equipped before it can return to combat effectiveness. December 15, 1944, 2300. On the eve of the German Ardennes offensive, Field Marshal Walter Model surveys the American lines from an observation post on the eastern edge of the Hürtgen Forest. He has skillfully used the forest to bleed the American First Army white, defending the approaches to the Roar River dams while preparing for the massive counterattack that will begin the next day. The Americans still don't understand why we defended this forest so tenaciously, he remarks to his staff. They think we were protecting the Siegfried Line, but we were really protecting something far more important. Time. Time to prepare our counteroffensive. The Hürtgen Forest has served its purpose perfectly. 9 American divisions have been fed into the meat grinder, one after another. More than 33,000 American soldiers have been killed, wounded, or captured. Thousands more have been incapacitated by disease, exposure, and combat exhaustion. The once mighty American First Army bled white in the dark forest, will now face the full fury of the German Ardennes offensive with depleted ranks and shattered morale. Meanwhile, the remnants of the 28th Division, still rebuilding after their ordeal in the Hürtgen, are positioned directly in the path of the coming German attack. Their suffering is far from over. December 16, 1944, 0530. The German Ardennes offensive begins with a massive artillery barrage. The 28th Division, still rebuilding after its ordeal in the Hürtgen Forest, finds itself directly in the path of the onslaught. Once again, the men who survived the Hürtgen must face the full fury of the German war machine. "Not again," whispers Private Thomas Reynolds as German shells begin falling on his position. "We barely survived the forest." Sergeant James Wilkins, one of the few veterans of both the Normandy landings and the Hürtgen campaign, still with the division, tries to rally his depleted squad. "Dig in," he orders. "We've been through worse." But they both know that's not true. Nothing has been worse than the Hürtgen Forest. Nothing could be. February 10, 1945. American forces finally secure the Hürtgen Forest and the Roer River dams, after nearly 5 months of continuous combat. The cost has been staggering. Over 33,000 American casualties to gain terrain that could have been bypassed entirely. Military historians will later conclude that the battle represented a massive tactical blunder by American high command. The Allies' overwhelming advantages in air power, artillery, and armor were neutralized by the forest terrain. The Roer River dams, which should have been the primary objective from the beginning, were targeted too late. The 28th Infantry Division, which suffered so terribly in the forest, managed to redeem itself during the Battle of the Bulge, when it helped slow the German advance through Luxembourg, despite still recovering from the Hürtgen. General Norman Coda, criticized for his division's performance in the forest, was later recognized for his leadership during the Ardennes offensive. Today, the Hürtgen Forest remains a dark, quiet place. German and American military cemeteries dot the landscape. Bunkers and foxholes can still be found beneath the forest canopy. Unexploded ordnance continues to be discovered regularly, the forest giving up its deadly secrets decade by decade. In the Wilde Sau minefield, where so many Americans died, memorial stones mark the sacrifices of both sides, including one dedicated to Lieutenant Friedrich Lengfeld, the German officer who died trying to save a wounded American soldier. Perhaps most haunting are the trees themselves. Many of the great firs and spruces still bear the scars of battle, embedded metal fragments, strange growths around old bullet holes, twisted shapes where artillery fire tore through trunks but failed to kill these silent witnesses. The forest remembers what happened here, even as the human world gradually forgets one of the most costly and futile battles in American military history. In the 1944 Hürtgen Forest Museum in Kleinhau, a visitor once left this reflection in the guest book. "I walked these woods today in peaceful sunshine. Birds sang. Children played nearby. Yet I felt the weight of souls still lingering among these trees. How many young men entered this forest and never left? How many still lie here, undiscovered, part of the forest now? This place takes your breath away, not with its beauty, but with its lingering sorrow." Every year, a few more unexploded mines and shells are found in the Wilde Sau minefield. The forest continues to yield its deadly harvest, the echoes of a battle where men fought not just against each other, but against the very land itself. A battle where the 28th Infantry Division earned its nickname, the Bloody Bucket, in one of the darkest chapters of American military history. Thank you for listening. If you are also proud of the bravery of our soldiers, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new historical stories.